Okay, Boker Tov and Shavua Tov. We are learning today about Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeira or Abuhatzeira. It depends on the pronunciation. I think they were used to call it Abuhatzeira, but it's all mean the same thing, as we would see in a minute. The shir is dedicated לעילוי נשמת רפאל משה בן אליהו זיכרונו לברכה. The Abuhatzeira family originally were called Elbaz. Elbaz means Baz is a falcon. Elbaz is the falcon. Al in Arabic is D. It's the how it's called? Hey, yeah. Definite. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so that's Al-Baz, the Baz, the falcon. It's like in we have Ashkenazic Rabbanim called Falk, Rabbi Yoshua Falk. It's the same name. It's the same name, just in different languages. And so is the origin is Elbaz. Now, from what I read, it seems that this is one of the rare cases in which you had Rabbanim in a place like in North Africa, in a place like Morocco, and these Rabbanim were not from the expelled from Spain. Usually what you had is that from the 16th century on, the Jews that were expelled from Spain arrived almost everywhere in North Africa and the Ottoman Empire. And basically, after 100 or 150 years, they took control over the leadership of these communities. In some places, the communities split. So you had the Toshavim, the residents, like the people that before the coming of the Spanish Jews, and you had the Mistaravim. These are the Spanish Jews. But in most places, you just had the Spanish taking over because they came with basically greater knowledge of Torah, and they had a very strong self-image, because we are the people that were willing to go away from Spain and leave everything behind for the sake of our faith. So we are the righteous, we are the strongest, and it is correct that in many of the places they arrived at, Torah scholarship was not in very high level, and cultural level was not at very high level. So they really were, everywhere they came, they became like the elite. So usually when you have a Rabbanim, so 300 years later, we are speaking now about the 19th century, usually it would be from the children, from the offspring of the Spanish originally expelled Jews. However, it seems, everything is speculations, but it seems that the Elbaz family is not originated in Spain. It was not, obviously it was not their self-perception. Usually the people that came from Spain were very adamant about it. It's not something that you hide. It's something that you put up front. And as I said, the original name was Elbaz. In the 16th century, the name was changed to Abuhatzeira. That was who is considered the father, the patriarch of the family. His name was Reb Shmuel Elbaz, and then Abuhatzeira. And why was he called Abuhatzeira is an interesting story, which I think sets the tone to this shiur. So Hatzira, or Tzera, is like a straw carpet or a mat. And Abuhatzeira means the father of the mat, which is somewhat of a strange nickname. But the way he got the nickname was, according to the story, that once he went to sail on a boat, on a ship, and he asked the captain to buy a ticket, and the captain did not sell him because he couldn't afford it. And then Rabbi Shmuel Abuhatzeira said, okay, if you don't want to give me a ticket, I will just sail alongside. And I guess the captain looked at him and said, okay, go ahead. And Rabbi Shmuel brought a mat and put it on the water and sat on the mat. And the captain looks at him, okay, fine, go. And then when the ship began to sail, he was like sailing behind them in the same speed and to the same direction. And at a certain point, the captain was worried that something would happen. I mean, it's an elderly man going on a man. I don't think it was a bad man, the captain there. So he wanted to go get him up to the ship. But Shmuel said, no, you had your chance, and now I am going by myself. And that's how it ended up. So he came to the shore, and from there on, he was known as Rabbi Shmuel Abuhatzeira. And throughout the stories about Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeira, who is his descendant 300 years later, and the other Rabbanim of the family of Abuhatzeira, it seems that the miracle of skipping the road, Kfitzat HaDerech, is one of the more, it makes appearance again and again and again. So it was something that was preferable to them, which I as someone that has to drive 100 kilometers each direction almost every day, I can understand. I would also be willing to fly on a mat, especially if it would be autonomous, right? And I could just sit and learn. Okay, anyhow, I guess I have more work to do before I can do that. So that's Rabbi Shmuel Abuhatzeira, who was the father of the dynasty, of the family. And from there on, their family was known. It was a family of Rabbanim, but not very famous. Until came our hero of today. This is Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeira. And from there on, this is like the, I don't know even what comparison to make. It's like the Baal Shem Tov. Imagine that the Baal Shem Tov would have children that would continue him son after son, then that would be the equivalent to what is the Abuhatzeira family to the Moroccan Jews. If you never saw it, it's very difficult to understand the amount of love and adornment that they have to the family of Abuhatzeira, and I hope that I will be able to explain why and how it became so during our shiur. So that's Rabbi Yaakov. His father was Rabbi Mas'ud, who was an Av Beidin of a city in Morocco called, I'm for sure I would know, as always, meaning, usually I butcher the names of European cities. So I think it would just be fair to now also do some harm to Morocco cities. So Tafilalt, and he was the rabbi there, he was the Av Beidin. Now, one day, Rabbi Mas'ud had a wife, and he had 4 daughters, no sons, and obviously he was interested in having also boys. Okay, and one day, a certain woman came to his Beidin in order to get a get, a divorce, and it took some time. The husband was late. In the end, they got the divorce bill, but it was already becoming dark. Now, the roads were somewhat dangerous back then in Morocco, so at least in this region. So Rabbi Mas'ud's wife, Mrs. Abuhatzeira, she offered this woman that is now a divorcee, she offered her a place in the house to sleep. And okay, everyone went to sleep. It was very nice. And during the night, Rabbi Mas'ud, that's the father of Rabbi Yaakov, had a dream. And in the dream, he was told that, now here there are different versions, either that his father came to him, or that the original Reb Shmuel Abuhatzeira, the one with the mat, came to him. So that is unclear. But one of the patriarchs of the family came to him and told him, you must marry the woman that now you ordered the get to, and she would carry you a male, a boy. Okay, now you have to remember that in Morocco of the time, it is perfectly okay to marry 2 women. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to divorce your first wife. Okay, but he woke up in the morning, he said to himself, I am, I don't know, 25, 30 years older of the girl, and I was the one to arrange the get, so it wouldn't look good. And so there was a dream. Chalomot shav yedaberu. The dreams sometimes are only nonsense. Yeah. So he went to Vatikin, he went to the shul, and sat there and daven and made his learning of after davening. Fine. He returns home around 10 o'clock. And to his surprise, he finds the woman still there. And he asks, she's sitting with his wife, and they speak, they eat, I don't know, some meat breakfast. And he asks his wife, what's going on? And his wife is telling him, I had a dream at night. And I dreamt that your father, or again, this Rabbi Shmuel, came to me and he told me that I must cause you and this woman to get married in order for her to carry a boy for you. And we already have everything sorted out. Okay, so they saw that, as I think they should have, as a sign from heaven that that's what she do, and they should do. And he married her, and she got pregnant. While she was pregnant, she dreamt, she saw in her dream a very large ox with huge horns. And she was very worried about it. It's a strange dream, a terrifying dream. So she told her new husband about Rabbi Masud. She told him about the dream. And he said to her, that's a sign for the strength of Torah of the baby that you are carrying within you. And sure enough, there was, Baruch Hashem, there was a healthy boy being born, and as we are used to, he was known immediately as bright and very skilled, and he was taught by his father. But as happens with this type of children, at the age of 6 or 7, the father was already couldn't really give him too much, so he was sitting in the shul by the child, 6 or 7. And not playing cards, but he was sitting in the shul and learning. Now, one day steps in a certain rabbi, a very famous rabbi from Algiers. Now, he had to run away because he had problems with the government of Algiers. Fine, so he's running away, and he says to himself, I'll go to Morocco for some time till the government in Algiers would. These places, they change the government every 5 years. And not because it's a democracy, because there is a revolution. So I just have to wait him, and someone would murder him, and I can come back. And he's sitting there, so he's coming to Morocco, and he's entering the shul, and he sees a child, 6 or 7 years old, and there is a large Gemara opened before him. So he said, boy, that's not a game. It's a Gemara, it's a holy book. Let's close it and return it to the shelf. And the boy says, but I am learning from it. And the boy says, no, you're not learning from it. Let me ask you a few questions and let's see. And he asks him a few questions. And on every question he has to ask, the boy is answering 3 answers, one in Pshat, one in Remez, one in Drash. Okay, so the rabbi understands there is something very special going on. And he says to the boy, would you be willing to learn with me in Chavruta while I am here? And the boy says, yes. And so they sit and learn every day for a few years. And the Rav gives the smicha to Rabbi Yaakov when he becoming a young lad, I would say. And that's the beginning of our hero, Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeira. We are speaking about the beginning of the 19th century. He was born in 1806. 1806. Now, what is nice when you speak about Europe, then we have a strife, right? We have this upcoming of modernity and reform and secular and haskala. Nothing. I mean, it depends where. In North Africa, there were places in which it began to crawl in, but in where Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeira was, it seems to be it was not an important aspect of his life. I mean, the stories about him are not stories of his war. When he would return, I would have to return to Europe next week. But when you return, you cannot speak about a rabbi in Europe. In beginning, let's say in 1750, from there on, every rabbi would be tested by his place in relation to modernity, in relation to secular studies. You cannot escape it. You cannot be above it. You have to choose what camp do you belong to. I hope, Be'ezrat Hashem, that Be'ezrat Hashem next week, I hope to speak about the Maharamshik, which is an interesting example of that. You cannot be someone that is above the dispute, because there is a war going on. When there is a war, you have to pick sides. And it's a sad reality. It's a sad reality. In Morocco, that was not the case, not at least not where he was, not when he was. So it's a story about just learning Torah, teaching Torah, judging, giving psakim, advancing Yahadut, advancing Avodat Hashem. Almost a boring story, but a wonderful story. And so he's throughout almost all of his life, he stays in the same city, in Tafilalt, in Morocco, and he is replacing his father as the Av Beis Din. But he's not only the head of the court of the small region, but around the age of 30, it is clear to everyone in Morocco and outside of Morocco that we have here a giant of Torah, and people are sending questions from all over. We have a responsa, 2 volumes by him, named Yoru Mishpatecha LeYaakov. So what it means is, they would teach your sentences, they would teach your laws to Yaakov, or from Yaakov, because his name is Yaakov, with many answers. Most of them are in the realms of mammonot, meaning of monetary sentences, judgment, and of gittin, because that's basically what a dayan back then would be dealing with. We have a very beautiful picture about his life from his son. Now, all of his sefarim were printed after his death. That is because he was, we would speak about it, he was a holy man in the very strict sense of the term. He was, he was very far from any enjoyment of this world. He was very humble. There are many, many, many stories that testify to his character. And one of the expressions to his humility was humbleness, was that he didn't want to publish his sefarim. Why? Because he thought maybe they are not worthy of it. His son asked him, but that's, why not? These are beautiful sefarim. People are asking questions from all over. All the Rabbanim agree that you are a great Rabbi. Why won't you print the Torah? He says, but maybe I'm wrong. I need a sign from heaven that my Torah is right. And then I would give you permission to print it. Now, according to the stories, and now I have to say, we are telling stories here, right? So it's his story. That's what we are speaking here about. It's very difficult to find reliable historical sources. And as I mentioned earlier, it's like the Baal Shem Tov in a sense. But the stories are part of the story. If you would omit the miracles from the person, then you remain with almost nothing. Because it's very clear that it's part of who he was, a very holy man, and miracles happened around him. So according to the story, he said to his son, I would not print the Sfarim until I would have a sign from heaven that the Sfarim are, that what is written there is correct and is seen favorably by God. Now one day, there was a break to his house, and the thieves stole everything, including the manuscripts. So the sons were devastated. They said, all your work for years and everything is gone. He said, no, that's a sign from heaven that I shouldn't have printed it. Okay, a few hours later, a knock on the door. Who is there? So 2 Arab people coming in, and they are clearly they are terrified, they are shocked. What's going on? We admit that we broken into your house earlier, and we took what we wanted. But when we tried to pass through the river, which is usually a very slow-paced and shallow river, when we came near to it, suddenly there was a wave coming. We couldn't pass. And we tried from one spot and another spot. Every spot we tried to cross, suddenly there was a wave coming. And we couldn't pass. And we understood that we made a mistake. So we want to apologize and bring back all of your stuff. And okay, so they get it back. The children say to their father, you see, that's a sign from heaven. Go on. He said, no, that is not good enough. He said, only after I am dead, I would be sentenced in the heavenly court. If I would be given there a green light, I would come back to you in a dream and tell you to print the Sforim. And that's what happened. So he didn't print anything throughout his life. He came in a dream to one of the children after his death, and he said, okay, you can print. By the way, not everything was printed. There was one big book on Kabbalah that got burned and was not printed, something about the Shabbat. There was another sefer that went missing in a mysterious way, and the rest of the sefarim were indeed printed. So 12 books, 12 sefarim were printed from him. So in the introduction to one of them, called Lebona Zaka, it's I hope that you can read. It's the letters are not very clear. The first source here. וכל מעשה, so it's the son writing about his father. Now, as you know, a son writing about his father, again, is not necessarily the most accurate historical source that you can have, but it gives you the impression. וכל מעשה תוקפו וגבורתו, תשיג ידו בטהרתו. So he says he was mighty, he was strong, and he had pureness, תשיג ידו בטהרתו, בסדר קדושה והבדלת. So he knew how to be holy, קדושה, והבדלת, and to separate himself. ונטירות היתרתא. So he was keeping himself excessively, much more than other people. So he was keeping himself in terms of what does he see? What does he eat? What does he hear? He was separate. He was to himself a very holy person. אכילתו ושתייתו, במידה, במשקל, נשקלות. What would he drink? What would he eat? So everything he was calculating. Do I really need it? And if not, if it's only for pleasure, it's not for him. ובכוונה גדולה על כל ברכה ותהילה. Every bracha he would do with a great כוונה. ולילה כיום יטיב בתענית. He would sit for day and night, fasting. בהפסקה של 3 ימים בסוד הכפלת. So he would fast a day, eat for 3 days, and then again, fast for a day. So it הכפלת, it twice in a week that he would fast. בכל שנה ושנה כן היה עושה, he would do it for the whole year every year, לבד מיום ליום ומחודש לחודש אלול המרוצה. So a part of אלול, in which, if I understand correctly, he would fast more. ומעולם לא פסק מורנו ורבינו לטבילותא, אפילו ביום הקריא. He would always immerse himself in a mikvah at every morning, even in cold days. אבי מטבר גזיזי דברתא, he would break the ice. Now, I'm not sure if in Morocco you really have an ice. I think it's a term. I think it's an expression. But it can be cold. In the morning, it can be cold, very cold. ונחת וטבל במקווה טהרה. ופי צדיק יהגה חי פרקי משנה בכל לילה ולילה. So every night he would say by heart 18 chapters of Mishnah. והכל בעל פה. עד גמירה וחוזר חלילה. After he finished, he would do it again and again and again. ולא עבר עליו חצות לילה בשינה. So he would always wake, the latest that he would wake up would be at midnight. Now again, it's a different word from ours. We are not going to sleep till midnight because we have electrical light. But for them, candles were expensive. So you went to sleep at sunset, more or less, or when the stars are out, you are out. You're going to sleep. So let's say that yesterday night, for example, you had Set HaKochavim when it was Motzei Shabbos 8:05. So by 9, you are out. By 12:30, which is midnight, he was awake. So 3.5 hours of sleep. And that is yes, that is during the summer. During the winter, you'd have a little more. עד אשר קם ועשה תיקון השכינה, ויצא מאוהל רחל ויבוא באוהל לאה, והוא יושב על הארץ באימה וביראה. So you do the תיקונים, there is a תיקון רחל, and תיקון לאה is קבלה. תיקון רחל and תיקון לאה, so from midnight on, he would be crying. תיקון רחל is crying for the exile of the Shechina. Because during the day, you see the troubles of the people. But at night, you are crying not for the trouble of the people, but the higher galut, which is the galut of the Shechina. So we're speaking about a very, very, very special person. Very spiritual, very holy. ודימתו על אחייו נדחה, he would cry, איך שפחה תירש גבירתה בגלות זה ארוכה, how the servant is inheriting the master. It means that the Muslims are ruling Eretz Israel instead of us. And it means that in the spiritual world, the true religion is being rejected for Islam and Christianity, who are ruling the world, again, also in the spiritual sense. and truth is being exiled from the world. והחרקן פה ממל אל רב רבן, and then he would begin to learn זוהר הקדוש וספרי הקבלה, עד העיר מזרח והגיע זמן תפילה. So from midnight to morning, it's Kabbalah time. וצדיק נעזר בגבורה לעשות כיוונים, הוא היה ראשון לעשרת מונים, so he would always be first in shul. As I guess a rabbi should be. You would have to replace. וסדר עבודתו בקדושה וטהרה, בשפה ברורה, עבודה זו תפילה, היא העולה למעלה בכוונות וייחודים, בקהל חסידים, וכל מעשה הוא על דרך רבינו הארי. So you do everything according to the Kabbalah of the הארי הקדוש. כאשר ירדוף הקורא בספריו הקדושים, אשר כבר מודפסים, etc. Okay, I think it's clear. So that's the description we get from his son about the type of personality, and I think we can begin to understand why he was so much revered by the people around him. Another story which I think reflects a lot of his personality in source bet, that's from a book named מעשה, that's his biography. So when they name your biography miracle stories, right, מעשה נסים, you know what realm you are in. So that's the name of the book, as מעשה נסים. עוד שמענו ממגידי אמת. So we heard from people of truth, שרבינו הקדוש עליו השלום במחוז תוניסי. So once he traveled to Tunisia. And I'll tell you it by heart, so I don't want to read. So he was traveling to Tunisia, and he was sleeping he was hosted by one of the rich of the community. Now, his name was already very much known, so he was accepted with much respect. And the Abir there arranged a very nice meal with the most beautiful utensils and everything, and he invited the best rabbanim and the richest men to sit there. So a very beautiful meal for the sake of this guest, honor guest, Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeira. And Rabbi Yaakov comes in, and he's dressed like a very simple person, and he sits and eats. And according to the story, the wife of the Abir is looking through the window. Obviously, I have to say that in Morocco of the time, men and women are not eating together. So the men are eating to themselves, and the women are eating to themselves, and serving. So the wife is looking through the window to see Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeira, the great rabbi, the great tzaddik. And she sees, and he's wearing very simple clothes. And she calls her husband, and she says to him, that's the great, for this man, we made all of these expenses and all of this hard work, and you invited everyone, and he looks like a dog. She said that, and according to the story, immediately after saying that, she begins to bark, and she cannot speak. And it's obvious to everyone that she is being punished for what she said, and they have no choice. So the husband asks Rabbi Yaakov to come into the kitchen and to sort out the problem, and they ask his forgiveness. And of course, he says to the wife, there is a certain cup here, and he gives a blessing to the cup. Now drink the water, and you'll be fine. And she drinks the water, and she's healed. And now the story is it's a beautiful miracle story, and B, it represents again his humility, and he didn't keep any grudge against the woman, and I think it represents I think the type of stories that you find. Now it's a whole book. I cannot tell you all of the stories. I think it's a typical story. It's very important to understand there is something here that is similar in a sense to Hasidism, and that is from Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeira and on, and it would also live with his children. And I think maybe a few may be familiar with his most famous, I think, grandchild is the Baba Sali, Rabbi Israel Abuhatzeira. And after him there was Rabbi Eliezer Abuhatzeira, the Baba Eliezer, who was murdered in the Netivot. And to this day, there is Rabbi David Abuhatzeira. It's a whole family. and all of them are behaving in a holy way. Now, obviously, I cannot attest to anyone if he's holy or not, but they are. Some of them have a tunnel from the hall to the shul, so they would not need to pass anywhere. That either they're in their home or in the yeshiva or shul, but they are not going in the street in order not to see anything that may be improper. So that is the type of people we speak about. And what was created around them, a part of that, they were great in Torah and many other things, but the culture of, I don't know how to pronounce it, even in Hebrew I'm not sure, but in English it's more difficult, but adornment and reverence and love, really love, that's the right word. I think it was very important in the ability of many of the Moroccan Jews to get through the shocking encounter with modernity when it did came, because it came, it did come. At least when they made Aliyah to Eretz Israel. And many of them went off the derech in the sense of Torah observance. But they were still kept by this bond. It's like a Hasidic court. It's not functioning the same way, but there is some, at least in my Ashkenazic eyes, there is some resemblance. Because when you have a leader, now you may not follow everything that he does, and you may, in your acts, you are very far from him. But if you love him and you have appreciation to what he stands for, then you cannot really go too far away. And that kept a connection. So this very personal connection. That's why the Baba Sali was so loved. Many of his followers, in their day-to-day practice, they were very far from what he preached. But they kept close to tradition and to religion by their love and by knowing that they can always come into the Baba Sali and have someone that loves them back and someone that they appreciate. And I think that for many of the people that came from Europe, such a figure was sorely missing, lacking. Because even the Hasidim by that time, if you were not dressed in the right way, and if you were not keeping with the institutions of the Hasidut, you can come to the Rabbi, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. Not because the Rebbe was not, I'm sure that many of the Rebbes would want to be Mekareb everyone, but the way that Hasidim developed, it became very closed group. And if you're not part of the group, if you sit there in the tish and you are dressed different than anyone else, and because everyone looks the same, and you are different. I mean, I sat in a few of these dishes. You cannot really feel part of the environment. But by the Baba Sali, everyone came in, regardless of how he's dressed. And he was loved, and he would be given a good word and a good advice. And yes, an encouragement to keep Torah more. So you know what, when you have such an encouragement from someone you appreciate, and your father appreciated, and your grandfather appreciated his grandfather, and you know there is a bond between you, and he's telling you, why won't you come to tefillah? Why won't you put tefillin every day? That makes it makes a dent, right, in the heart, and that's a beautiful thing that Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeira was able to establish, and that his children were able to carry on. And I think it's very important to acknowledge it, and that is beyond all the stories of beautiful, beautiful stories. But for me, all of them are serving this purpose of being able to connect people to a religious leader, to a religious role model. One of his children, again, so he has, I don't remember, I think he had 3 boys or 4. And every book that they published, so one of the boys were writing his own introduction. So in one of them, he had a very nice introduction in which he analyzed the different parts of Torah, you may say, that his father had a great mastery of. And he says there are 4. One is Gemara. So that's you remember the story about the Rabbi coming in, so asking and answering and pilpul of iyun in Gemara. So that was one field. The second field is giving halacha, because as I said, he replaced his father as the Av Beidin of the city, and he was giving questions from all over, and he was paskening halacha. And in his halacha, look at source Gimel. That's one of his pirushim. He explained here the bracha of Yaakov to Shevet Dan. Dan Yadin Amo. What is Dan Yadin Amo? So it's a play of words, but what does it mean? כלומר, הדן שהוא הדיין, the Dan, it's the judge, שהוא הדיין, צריך שידין את עמו, he needs to judge his people, כאחד שבטי ישראל, דהיינו שיהיו בעיניו בשווה, everyone is equal, the Dayan and the parties, כאחד as one of Israel tribes, ולא יחניף לשום אחד מהם, so it should also be fair to each one of them. He's not closer to one than to the other. ומה שאמר אימו, כלומר צריך שיחשוב שהם אימו בשווה, they are all equal. ולא יהיה לו לשום אדם יתרון על חברו. No person has an advantage over his fellow Jew. And that is the truth. שהרי הם כאחד שבטי ישראל. כולם שבטי יה ובני יה. They are all the children of God. And the tribes of God. אין לבקר שום אחד על חברו. So no one should be favored over the other. Now, obviously, every judge would say, no, I'm not favoring anyone. But there is one thing to say that, and the other is that people coming into the judge really feel it. Without getting into no politics of today. But one of the problems that we are hunted by is that a large part of the population, for good reasons or for not, you can weigh it anyway, but they feel that the judges are disconnected from them. They feel that there is no shayachut, they have no way to relate. Judges are from a different regard. No, I don't want to go into current politics. That won't do good neither to me or to you or to the topic. But I just want to emphasize this small point that a judge that is really one of the people is coming from a very different angle than how did they say in the United States the Shoftei HaElyon, right? They are supreme. Yes. Supreme. That is not כאחד שבטי ישראל. So it's a very different type of a perception of what judgment is and how a judge should behave. And okay, so it's an interesting approach. I gave here a tshuva from one of his responsa. Let's read it quickly. ראובן מצא ועידה של הגוי. So Reuven had found a last object that a non-Jew dropped. So they lived with the Goyim in the same cities. So there was an object that fell for a value of that fell from a non-Jew, and the Jew found it. And obviously, what did he do? Put in his pocket, right? What can you do? So he put in his pocket, and for 30 days he was going with it. I don't know. Let's say, just for the sake of it doesn't give us the specifics, but let's say it was a watch. So there was a watch falling from the non-Jew, and the Jew found it. He knew that it fell from a non-Jew. So he said, according to halacha, I am allowed to take it to myself. There is no mitzvah of hashavat aveda to a non-Jew. So he took it to himself, and he put it on his hand, and everything is nice. He went it for 30 days. And then, הלך שמעון, והלשין עליו לגוי, his friend, so-called, and said to the non-Jew, you know where your watch is? Reuven found it. ובא הגוי והוציאו ממנו. So the goy came and they took it from Reuven. And Reuven sued Shimon to Din Torah, to the rabbinical court, that he should pay him for the watch that he lost. That was the question. This is the question. And tshuva, now the answer. כתב מטה שמעון בסימן, it begins with a certain response that was earlier to him, so a precedent, right? It begins with quoting earlier sources. שישראל שמצא אבדת הגוי ובא ישראל והלשינו לגוי. So if a Jew found a non-Jew a lost object and then someone else came and was מלשין, told him over, no. then לכולי עלמא חייב לשלם זה המלשין מאחר שישראל כבר זכה פה ונעשה ממונו. So according to this earlier source, then that's the halacha that he needs to pay, because really the first one, Reuven, want the object, it's his, you caused him to lose it for no good reason, so you have to pay. That makes sense. He does not agree. And he says, on two grounds, I disagree. And it's very interesting. He says, Omnam, מאחר דכולי עלמא גרירי בתר מרן ומורם. He says, you know, the Jews, they have two different pillars of ruling. The Shulchan Aruch and the Rema. The Shulchan Aruch for the Sfaradim and the Rema for the Ashkenazim. He says, I'm going to prove to you that according to both, he doesn't need to pay because the first one was not entitled to the watch. Now, I wouldn't go into his analysis of the sources because there is another few things I want to be able to do today, but I would just say what were his two reasons, so not two grounds. So one ground, he says, even if the Torah allowed you to take the last object of a non-Jew, it doesn't mean that it's really yours. It only means that you are allowed to take it and to use it, but it's still something that you benefited from nothing. So if you lose it because you didn't pay for it, then there is no damage if it is being taken from you. That is one ground. That is and he proves that that's the position of the Rema, Rabbi Moshe Isserlich. And then he says, but more than that. Now skip to Od Katav Maran. You see? It's in the 2 lines before the end. So now it comes from the Shulchan Aruch. עוד כתב מרן סימן ר' ס"ו, וזה לשונו. אבדת הגוי מותרת. So, the Shulchan Aruch says you are allowed to take to yourself the last object of a non-Jew. Why? שנאמר אבדת אחיך. והמחזירה, if you give it back, הרי זה עובר עבירה. There is a sin, there is a crime to give the אבדה back. Why? מפני שהוא מחזיק ידי עוברי עבירה. So the Shulchan Aruch, because the goyim are usually, they are sinners, so if you give them more means to make their crimes. So you should not support sinners. So that's why you're not supposed to give them back the last objects. Says Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeira, נראה לעניות דעתי, דסביר עלי, דלא אמר הרב שם בסנהדרין, אלא בגויים שבזמן הזה, שמודים בבורא עולם ונימוסיהם, להחזיר אבדה. עד כאן לשון אביר הגולה. נמצא לפי זה המחזירה לגוי אינו עובר. He says, that was correct as long as the goyim, as the non-Jews were sinners. They were really worshipping idols. So what would they do if you'd return the last object? They may make a sacrifice to their idol, and some of them may kill Jews or something. So they are sinners, so you're not allowed to support them. But our goyim, and it's very interesting, in Morocco, in the 19th century, our goyim are nice and civil people. So there is no problem in giving them back the last object. It's even the right thing to do. So what the guy that told about the last, he made the mitzvah, he's fine. And you have done something that is bad. לכן המלשין פטור מלשלם. So its conclusion is that the guy, Shimon, right, the second guy, is exempt from paying to Reuven. So it's a very interesting ruling. So again, so two reasons. Says, A, even if you would say that Reuven was justified in keeping the object, he didn't pay for it. So there is no damage to him in losing it. The second reason is that Reuven was not really entitled to keep the object. Because all that we said that you are not supposed to give back last objects to non-Jews is about Jews, it's about non-Jews that were sinners. But our non-Jews, again, our in Morocco, it's obviously every place and time would have to be, halacha would have to be analyzed. But it says in our time and place, they are very nice people. And indeed, they had very good relationship with the non-Jews. It is well known that many of the Arab local people, when they had the judgment between each other, they would go, they knew that he's a wise man and he's a holy man, and what he would say would be accepted by both parties, which is the most important thing about the judge, and that is that the parties would accept his ruling. And so they went to him. So he was also accepting non-Jews in his court. And I guess that he had a very good relationship with them. Now, in Morocco, it was very complicated. When sometimes things were good there, sometimes no. But in his time and place, it went very well. It went very well. So that's about his function as a dayan, as a judge. Now, the third field, so we said 4 fields, right? One field was a Gemara, second field was a judge, halacha, third field was drushim. He was a darshan, and he gave drashot in the shul. He wrote books of darshanut, and the fourth field is Kabbalah. And here he is somewhat of an exception among the North African rabbis, and I wonder if it has to do with his origin, not from Spain, but from Morocco. That's a very wide speculation. I didn't see it mentioned anywhere. But usually in North Africa, the approach was that you are not supposed to learn Kabbalah till after you are after 40, and you not necessarily 40, but after you are in some certain ripe age, and you learned a lot of pshat, and even then it's not for everyone, only for very special people. That was the basic approach. Now in Ashkenaz, it depends. If you were a Litvak, then basically it was the same thing. But if you were Hasidic, then there are different Hasiduyot, but in many of the Hasiduyot, you would learn Kabbalah in a much earlier age, because there was this understanding that the Baal Shem Tov brought Kabbalah down to our world, and now it's less dangerous, and you can learn it through his own lenses. Okay, fine. But in North Africa, the approach was that Kabbalah is for very high-level people. That was not the approach of Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeira. He believed, while he said clearly that you cannot immediately, we're not speaking Madonna here, right? We're not speaking about beginning from Kabbalah. You should begin from the Torah Shebiltav, and the Torah Shebal Peh, and Gemara, and Halacha. Fine. But everyone is supposed also to arrive at learning Kabbalah. He saw it as something that is important for every Jew. I think, and again, I can only surmise, but I think it's part of this democratic approach that we saw earlier, that is less willing to divide the world to elites who are learning special things and are specialized and get special treatment and wear different clothes. Right? It's not who he is. He believes that he's wearing as everyone else, and that he's judging everyone on the same level, regardless if he's the great Talmidei Chachamim or simple men or even non-Jews. Right? He's relating to them more or less equally, more or less. And it may be that part of this approach is, so why Kabbalah? If you believe that Kabbalah is an essential part of Jewish belief and of practice, then it should be taught basically to everyone. Now again, just as halacha should be taught to everyone, that it may be that you should not begin in the age of 3, right, to teach him Gemara. So you should wait till someone is prepared for this type of learning. But it's something that you should aspire to and bring the people to learn it. And he wrote a few books within this approach. So I skipped to source Vav. That's from our Parshat HaShavua. Meaning from Behar, not from Emoris. We are done with. So Behar. So in Behar we have the mitzvah, וכי ימוך אחיך עמך ומתי ידו עמך, וכי ימוך אחיך ומתי ידו עמך, והחזקת בו ger ותושב וחי עמך. So this pasuk is on the pshat level, on the plain level, it's very clear. If you have a brother that is beginning to fall down, yamuch, financially, then you should hold his hand, support him, so he can live with you. But the language is very convoluted. It's going back and forth, and imach again, and suddenly he's a ger v'toshav. He begins as a brother, but suddenly he's a stranger and a resident. So something in the language is not completely clear. Says Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeira. By the way, the name of the book, Machsof HaLavan, is from the sticks that Yaakov Avinu, because Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeira was very connected. He saw his neshama as being an offspring of the neshama of Yaakov Avinu. So Yaakov Avinu, you remember that he wanted the sheep to have what is stripes? Thank you, stripes and the ktamim. So what he did was he took sticks and he peeled them. So the white of the stick would be shown, and that is supposedly to affect in some genetic engineering on the offspring of the sheep. Now, I'm not going right now into this parsha, but what is the story is about how you peel the outer layer and you reveal the inner core. So the book is called Mahsof Alavan because it gives you an insight into the inner, the white core of the Torah, right? So it begins from the pasuk, but it gives you this hatzatza. And he says, וכי ימוך אחיך ומטה ידו עמך וצחקת בוגר ותושב בך עמך. אפשר לרמוז על יצר הטוב, דהו אחיו האמיתי של האדם. It says, who is the real brother of every one of us? It says, it's our יצר הטוב, our good inclination. Thank you. Our good inclination. That's our real friend. Every other friend would someday somehow fail you. But the good inclination, as long as you follow him, you are safe. So that is the אח, שנוהג עמו אחווה גמורה, שמורה לו דרך טובה וישרה, שמועלת לו בעולם הזה ובעולם הבא. So he is the one that shows you the right way that would benefit you both in this world and the next world. ועל ידי העוונות שמרבה האדם מתמסכן היצר הטוב. But sometimes the יצר הטוב, the good inclination, is falling down, ימוך. Now, why is he falling down? When you are making sins and you're not heeding to him, then he becomes small and weak. So the pasuk speaks about your brother, meaning the good inclination, becoming weak because of your sins. So what should you do? ועל ידי העוונות נמשכים נרן שבאדם, נרן is a ראשי תיבות of נפש, רוח, נשמה. So these are the different levels of spirit, of animation that there is in a person. So that's Kabbalah. Obviously, we are only scratching the surface. But so these are the three different levels. The most basic level is nefesh. When you are hungry, it's not your body that is hungry, right? It's you that is hungry. But it's a very low level of the you, right? Of the neshama. It's called nefesh. And then you have ruach, which is the ruach is the will, let's say. And then you have the neshama, which is the divine inspiration. There is a human being. And there are two more levels, chaya v'yechida, which is even above the human. They are not part of, you are being sustained by them, but they are not even part of the you. So that's a very basic explanation. So the nefesh, ruach, neshama are becoming dark. Why? Because if I am making sins, then they cannot lie, they cannot shine. So they are being yimach. And then, עיקר היצר הטוב הוא להזהיר האדם, שישמור נרן שלו, שלא יעבדו ממנו חס וחלילה. So the work of the יצר הטוב is to get you to keep your נפש רוח נשמה, don't חס וחלילה kill them. That is the karet, right? If you are killing your connection with if you remain only with the nefesh, with the low level, and you are losing the connection to the high level, then you are being cut off of divine inspiration. And then he says, והנה נרן, excuse me, ועל ידי ירידתם יורד גם הוא ונעשה עני. So by them being cut off, you yourself are becoming an עני. So וכי ימוך אחיך ומטה ידו עמך. So you both are falling down. If you are failing your יצר הטוב, both of you, would fall down. And then he says, there is a certain angel called Matat. Okay, we are not, obviously, again, that's beyond my pay grade. So I'm just telling you what is written here. So there is a certain angel, and his name is very close to the word Mata, Mata Yadcha. So this angel, his head is in one word, and his body is in another word, and his feet are in a third word, and he can, so because he is in the different words, it's like a ladder, and you can climb on it, on this angel. So these are secrets, right? But we are just to explain the language. So you can reconnect yourself by this angel to the upper worlds that you had lost to connection to by the sins. So the sins are like creating clouds, and then the reception is bad. So you need to clear, you need to go be above the clouds. So you are climbing on this angel. ככתוב, הוא מסע לבני ישראל המתעוררים לשוב בתשובה ולתקן דרכיהם, ככתוב, הנה אנוכי שולח מלאך לפניך לשומרך בדרך, והוא מליץ טוב וזכות על ישראל, ועליו תקנו בתפילה ויעמוד מליץ טוב לצדקנו, הוא יגיד ישרנו. So this malach is responsible for enabling us to return. Even after we cut the cord, right? So we are on our own. No, this malach would give you, it is like the spare parachute. So even if you lost the first one, there is still what to connect to in order to go up. וזהו שאמר הכתוב, כי אמוך אחיך הוא יצר הטוב שנשפל ונתמסכן מחמת עוונותיך, ועל זה ומטה ידו עמך. So by our sins, our יצר הטוב declines, and so we all are sinking down. And then he says, by your hand, you can hold to this angel, and אם תחזור בתשובה, הרי חזקת בו, ודע שיש לך עוזר וסומך, which is this angel, and he would help you to repair, and then you shouldn't worry, and וחי עמך. Then you would return to live, you would return to life. So that's the type of explanation. So he takes this pasuk, obviously he's taking it out of his plain meaning, but that's why we say that every pasuk had 4 different meanings. There is the pshat, there is the remes, there is the trash, and there is the sod. So that's, I guess that would be a remes type of thing, in which you take every word and you sail with it, right, on your mat, on your boat to different locations, which I think is a beautiful, it's a beautiful way. So as I said, most of his life, he was a Rav in Tafilalt, in the city in Morocco, and he really wanted to go to Eretz Israel. And he had a love to Eretz Israel. And again, remember Yaakov Avinu, who didn't want to go out from Eretz Israel. He was carried again and again by the force of life. He had to run from Esav, but then he came back. But then Yosef went down to Egypt. So, but he wanted to go back to Eretz Israel. So he said, I want to go to where the patriarch of my neshama was not able to go. I want to go to Eretz Israel. And for 5 times he tried to leave, and the people of the city stopped him from leaving. They didn't want this holy man to abandon them. And then he said to them, I feel that I'm nearing the end of my life, and I would like very much to go. And they were not able to convince him. And he left Tafilalt, and he went to Algeria and Tunisia and Louvre, in Egypt, and in Tetvav of Tevet, he reached Alexandria, and he was hosted there by a certain person named Moshe Sarusi. We have the name, in a minute you'll understand why. And, excuse me, in Yudzayin Betevet, he came to a city named Damanhur. There was this Moshe Sarusi, Damanhur, this Moshe Sarusi, and he became sick in Egypt, because Yaakov Avinu has died in Egypt. So he also became very sick in Egypt. And the story goes that he was making the Kiddush on El Shabbat, and suddenly one of the Shabbat candles went off while he was doing the Kiddush. And he stopped the Kiddush, and he said the neshama would go back to heaven, and the body would be wherever he would be. And the people around him were shocked, but and then he just continued the Kiddush and continued everything as usual. The next morning, he fell sick, and for a few days, the sickness was getting worse and worse. And again, there is a story about the doctor coming in and saying that he only have a few hours left. And Rabbi Yaakov said, "No, I know that I have a few days, and I'm not called yet." And he had a few more days, and then he was niftar there in Egypt. That was 1880, so the age of 74, which is a nice age for the time. 74, he was buried there, and to this day people are going to his kever in Egypt to make the Hilula. Now they had some problems in the last few years because of the anti-Semitism in Egypt. There is a problem coming there, and the government made a law against coming. I mean, it's a whole story. It's a whole story. But as I said, his legacy very much lives on with his children that became themselves great rabbis, and we spoke about the Baba Sali and his descendants. and there is a settlement named Kochav Yaakov in Binyamin, named after him. And there are many schools and shuls called Yaakov, Abir Yaakov, so different names that all relate to him. And as I said, I think that beyond the miracles and beyond the Torah and beyond the Kabbalah and beyond the opinions, his ability to create this strong connection between the simple Jew and his rabbi was a great gift that he was able to give to Am Israel. And with that, we conclude. And Bezrat Hashem, we would go back next week to war-torn Europe.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, תודה רבה.